And now, without further ado, please welcome our speakers for tonight, Manoj and Glenn.
Fantastic. Thank you, everybody. Lovely to see you. And if we haven't met before, my name's Glenn, and I'm doing the talks in the evenings here at Highfields Church. So great to be with you. But tonight, it's all about Manoj Raithatha. Did I kind of get that right?
Yeah, you did, yeah.
Yeah?
Excellent, yeah.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah.
Oh, very good. You have written this brilliant book, which I've just read in the last day. It's your story. It's called Filthy Rich. Did you always want to be filthy rich?
I suppose I signed up to the whole idea of making money from an early age, and those sort of thoughts started to emerge because we moved out to East Africa, to Kenya, to Nairobi, and the reason we moved was because my father was a civil engineer in this country, and he'd lost his job, and so we were basically economic migrants going to East Africa to make money because my father had an opportunity to join his brother in the family business. And so I thought we were going to live the high life in East Africa, but it didn't work out that way. For various reasons, my father was basically working for his brother. He wasn't getting paid the kind of money that he thought he was going to get paid. And I used to watch my mother, sort of baking cakes and running cookery classes and things like that. And I was told all these stories of my grandfather's rise to riches, how he was audacious, he was a risk taker, how he built this big block of offices in Nairobi city center, and I wanted to be just like him. So I kind of signed up early that I was going to be in charge of my own destiny. I was going to be a businessman, yes. And money was going to be my life.
And did you have any idea that property would be the way that you'd earn that money?
No, but I had a leaning towards property because my grandfather was into property. Okay. My father wasn't a businessman, he was a civil engineer, he always worked for people. But my grandfather was into property and swimming pools as well. So I thought it'd be something to do with construction, something in that area.
Okay, so tell me about life growing up. What was life like in your home?
Well, I was brought up in Watford, 1972, I was born. What can I say about my childhood? There's lots of things I could say, but actually, my vivid memory would really be about going to the Hindu temple. We went to the Hindu temple regularly. My father had come over from East Africa to the UK in the 60s at a time when you guys look really young, so you might not remember the Beatles singing songs about Eastern religions. And it was during that period that my father became fascinated about his own faith, thinking, well, look, if all these people are singing songs about Hinduism, I need to find out about my faith. And so really that's one of the big vivid memories I have, going to the temple every week, growing up in a home where God was not an optional extra, but we were encouraged to take God seriously.
And Jesus, like he would have had some kind of place in your thinking, perhaps, or?
No, other than going to school in this country, and singing a few hymns, which you did in assemblies back then. But actually, I was first introduced to Christianity when we went out to Kenya. So I was 8 years old. My parents sent me to a Christian-run school, which you might be thinking that's utterly crazy. When you've got devout Hindu parents, they take us to the temple every week. We move out to East Africa, and they send us to a Christian school where they were going to basically share the Christian faith very, very regularly. But I suppose as Hindu parents, they didn't think that I would develop any kind of interest in it. But over a period of time, I did develop a fascination.
Yeah. In what way? What was it that was drawing you to the Christian message at that point?
Well, to this day, I still think it's a bit of a crazy concept, because if you break it down, the Christian message is basically the creator dying for the created. Now, I was brought up on Bollywood films. You don't hear stories like a king dying for his servants. But try and get your head around the whole concept. If God created everything and created humanity, then God takes on human flesh to die for humanity. Why would the created die for the created? So there's something about the story that resonated.
Right. It was crazy, but it was also beautiful.
Well,
in a sense.
Yeah, and it caused a lot of debate in our family.
Right.
Because my father was really incensed that I came home one day and I said, look, just think about it, Dad. There might be something in this Jesus character because he died for all of humanity. not just one tribe or nation or tongue. And this is what my dad did, because every Hindu house, if you're Hindu in the room, you will know that every Hindu house has a temple in their house. A little area where they have the Hindu deities and they go and worship the deities. And my dad was not happy, so he moved the Hindu temple into my room.
Wow.
And what time does he decide to come in the morning? 5 o'clock in the morning. I'm going to school, yeah? I'm like 12 years old, and my dad comes in at 5 o'clock in the morning, switches on the lights, and starts chanting. So that's how I woke up every morning.
Wow. To attract you to
Yeah. And after my fascination started to go, then the temple got moved out.
Okay, and why did the fascination start to go, do you think?
Well, it's all to do with money.
Right.
Because my parents were struggling financially. Now, they weren't struggling like many people struggle today. We always had food on the table, we had a roof over our heads, but there was always, discussions, arguments around money because my father wasn't getting paid as regularly as he should have got paid. And I suppose I came to the conclusion that, yes, this Christian message is interesting. It's about God's love for humanity, God's love for me, if it is for real. But what does God have to do with living in the real world where my parents are struggling to make ends meet?
Right. And that was a big issue in your parents' marriage as well.
Well, it ultimately cost them the marriage, and for Hindus, particularly that generation, they wouldn't quickly divorce. It was an arranged marriage. It wasn't that there was any kind of issues like violence in the marriage. It was just the fact that there were money issues. And normally that generation would stick it out, but it didn't work out that way.
And what does that do to you as a son looking on, and you're seeing that money issues were such a huge issue in your parents' marital breakdown? I guess there's some part of you saying, I will never let that happen myself, or money is an answer to some of life's problems. Is
Absolutely.
That
Well, I think it was the fact that, I didn't want to be like my father, so that was the big thing in my life. I didn't want to be like him. I didn't want to be dependent on other people. I wanted to take charge of my life. But I also like the whole idea, and I suppose many youngsters do, of the power that comes with money, and the influence that comes with money, and the recognition and the status, particularly if you can live in a nice house and a nice car.
Yes.
So there was that kind of stuff going on as well.
Yeah, we'll get into some of that. But before you became filthy rich, you were actually a writer, an award-winning writer, a BAFTA award-winning writer. How did that come about?
It's all about timing, as we were discussing earlier. It's about timing. I wrote an Asian play, British Asian play, not a great title, called BBA and Proud, British-born, Asian and Proud. That's what it means. Took it up to Edinburgh Festival, and we were sort of performing in a church hall, maybe to 5 people, 10 people, most nights.
Right.
Because there's like Edinburgh. Thousands of productions, aren't there, at the Edinburgh Festival? But some really important people came in not the last week, the week before, and they awarded it a Fringe first. And so basically we were packed after that. And it was all about timing. At that time there was a fascination with Asian culture and some of the issues within the Asian community. And so it's all about timing, and that sort of led us on to write a TV series, which, yes, we did win a BAFTA, but as I was telling Glenn earlier, there was a whole team of writers with us. And so we probably only wrote about 5% of the actual TV series, but we've got an award for it. But it was a team effort.
Yeah. Fantastic. And you were an English teacher as well, and all that kind of stuff. So all the while, it strikes me that temperamentally you're wired as more like a property tycoon.
Oh, yes, yeah.
But you were sort of donning the cardigan and going into school and teaching people poetry.
Yeah.
How did that work?
Well, the problem that happened is that we moved back from Kenya to the UK. Well, my sister and I did. I'm a twin, and my parents followed. And so I was kind of by myself in this school because my sister went to another school and I was studying in Portsmouth. Maybe I shouldn't say that in Southampton. I want to get out of here alive. But I went to a college in Portsmouth. And because I was by myself, I was just having a way of a time. It was going down the pub and drinking, and I wasn't studying hard enough. So I didn't get the grades to do economics at university. And I thought economics was going to be my route into business. But I did really well in English. And so I ended up going through the clearing system and ended up at Bangor University in North Wales doing an English degree. Came out of university thinking, what am I going to do with my life? And I'd been going out with a girl. I I was one of those sad people at university that found a girlfriend right at the beginning. You know, you've got Freshers Week, and then you've got a couple of weeks later, and you're going out with a girl, and everybody else is going crazy, and I'm basically having candlelit dinners with this girl. And we were together from literally week 3 or 4 throughout university and basically for another 2 years. So we were together for 5 years, and I followed her into teaching.
Yes.
But it wasn't really, can I just say this thing, yeah?
Yes.
When you know that your idol as a teacher.
An idol?
Yeah.
Explain what an idol is first.
No, just saying the person that I looked up to as a teacher,
Yes.
in this school was this guy in this classroom next to me that had a bin bag underneath the desk. And he'd ask the students to do their homework and essays. They were always essays if you're an English teacher. And then he'd put their work in this bin bag. And the students would forget to ask him after 3 or 4 weeks of asking him, have you marked the work? And he'd say, no, I'm going to mark it. And at the end of the year, what does he do? He ties up the bin bag. Now, if you look up to somebody like that, you know you're in the wrong profession. So that's why I left teaching.
You weren't quite as good a teacher as him.
No, definitely not.
So then how did you get into the whole property game then?
Well, it was always there. I didn't feel that, with writing, it was something I had to work for, or English teaching. I found that hard work. But when it came to business, I didn't even need anybody to tell me how to do it. It was, I can do it. Wow. It was in my blood. That's what my grandfather did. And for a lot of Asians, business is just something that you do. We're naturally risk takers anyway. And what I did was I essentially bought my first house in Wandsworth because I thought to myself, I'm not going to be paying rent. There's no way I'm paying rent. I'd earned some money as a furniture salesperson, and I got some extra support from family. And had this deposit, not a lot of money, but I saw this brilliant property in Wandsworth. It had a railway line at one end, a council depot at the back, but it had bags of space and lots of character. In East Putney, I could have spent £110,000 for a one-bedroom flat, but 100 meters down the road, I could buy a whole house. Nobody wanted to live on this road. And I liked the idea of the risk, I suppose, but I believed that road would come good, and it did come good. Within a few years, yuppies started to move in, developers started to chop up the houses into flats, and before I knew it, I'd sold it for more than double. And that kind of was my entry into sort of buying property.
I wonder how many people are here thinking, I wonder what that's worth today, and I wonder if anybody could actually scrape together a deposit to buy that kind of house in today's market. I bought
it for 110. It's got to be worth $1 million today. And I sometimes look back and think, oh, what if I'd kept that property?
Yeah. But you are a risk taker by nature. Always? You've always been a risk taker?
Well, no, I wouldn't say always, actually. I'm a twin, and I was in my sister's shadow for many years. And she used to talk for me because I lacked confidence. I was quite shy. So as a kid growing up with her, she was the one that won every award. Can you imagine at primary school, there was 9 awards in our final year. And the final year or the year before that, she won 7. And a few years before that, I used to always get a position in your class. So she always used to come first. And I remember coming 17th one year out of 19. So there was a big difference academically. And I remember watching, do you ever watch The Voice? I like The Voice. And I was thinking to myself, why do I like The Voice as an adult? And then it suddenly struck me that as a kid, I didn't have that voice. It took quite a few years before that voice came out. And then I developed my personality and my heart for risk.
So how did you go from one property in Wandsworth to a portfolio of hundreds of properties?
Well, what I did quickly was that I had this money that I'd made from selling my first house. So what I thought I'd do is, well, put it this way. Let's say you've got £100,000 sitting in your bank account. I could effectively buy 7 apartments with that £100,000. If I'm putting down £10,000 or £12,000 to complete on a transaction with the rest of the money with a mortgage, you've suddenly got a portfolio of 7 properties. So I literally went on a spending spree. I've sold my house, and now I'm just going to go and buy some flats. Now, the flats back then were £100,000, let's say, or £80,000. Those properties are not going to be worth that today. And then as the property prices were rising, I would then remortgage very, very quickly, and the banks were literally throwing money at you. So I'd then go out and buy some more. And so before I knew it, I was a landlord of a lot of properties.
And you're quite a charmer, aren't you? So
Wow. I wouldn't describe myself like that, but
that helps, doesn't it?
But it helped in one way, yes. That's interesting you picked up on that. I got involved in buying and selling off-plan because I'm not cut out for DIY. In fact, I had some people around my house today. They were doing a bit of filming and they needed a screwdriver. My toolkit for my house is about this small. You know, that's all that is in there. But I realized I'm not really cut out for decorating. So why don't I just buy off-plan? Which is basically...
Explain what off-plan is, yeah.
So I'd go to a builder like Taylor Wimpey or Barrett's and see the properties that they're going to build. So they might not have put a spade in the ground, and you know you've got a brochure, and you look at the plans, you select the apartment you want, you exchange contracts on it, which is basically put some money down, and then 18 months later you complete on it. Well, I discovered that actually I could go to a builder and buy not just one, but maybe a dozen or so, exchange contracts on it, and then sell the contract straight away. And that's really where charm came into it, because talking about risk-taking, I went to a builder in Leeds, and I wanted 100 one-bed apartments in this block, okay? Now, I'd set up a company, but we didn't have the money to exchange contracts. So just imagine that I'm going to put down £100,000 to reserve these flats, and then 8 weeks later, I've got to basically pay, let's say, another £800,000. But I haven't got the £800,000.
Is anyone getting queasy just at the thought of this?
This is how we made a lot of money, and I'm not suggesting you do this, but this is how our business was built. So I went to this developer, and he said, well, you know, we're not going to sell you these 100 flats. And I said, look, I can get you £200,000, not £1,000 reservation. We'll give you £2,000, so £200,000, which I had, and I'm going to get that into your bank account tomorrow. Will you do a deal? And they did a deal. There was no background financial checks. Our company didn't have the money to exchange. However, I'd had an idea, which was if I could find enough buyers that would buy these contracts off me, then on the day that I exchanged contracts with the builder, let's say 8 weeks later, all of these buyers would be with another solicitor. They would exchange contracts with me. So it'd be simultaneous. So I'm exchanging contracts with the builder. My buyers exchange contracts with me through one solicitor. Their money goes up to my solicitor, and our money goes up to the builder. And it was the craziest risk going.
Yeah.
But I'd learned a few tricks through selling furniture, which I did for a year, which actually is where I got the deposit for my house, which is you just give a sense of what you're doing, but you don't need to oversell. You know, when people come into a furniture store, they're coming in to buy a sofa. Don't you hate those people that rush around after you and try and hard sell? Actually, no, don't talk about the product. Just give them a sense of the product.
Yeah.
I used to serve them coffee.
Yeah.
Dowie Agbo coffee. Talk about anything else but the sofa, and they'd be signing on the dotted line.
Yeah.
And as an Asian, you know, within our community, you get to know lots of people. You drop things in conversation. They get a sense that you're making money, and then they ask you, well, how can I have a slice of the property pie? And that's where it came in. And it was a big risk, but I think we managed to sell about 80 odd apartments. And that was enough because they were paying more. I got enough on exchange to do it. That was my first big deal.
And how are the anxiety levels at that stage? Because, you know, like anyone...
Very stressful.
Yeah.
Very stressful. But actually, I've had more stressful ones, you know, with the crash. Maybe we'll talk about that in a minute. But yeah, very stressful because, you know, you're going to lose maybe £200,000. But I suppose I came to the conclusion, because I was a bit cocky and confident back then, that if I lost £200,000 on this deal, even if that was all my savings, I believed that I could make £200,000 anyway again.
Yeah.
So actually, that's how I kind of worked it out in my head.
Yeah.
But people thought I was mad.
Yeah. So tell us about the good times. Before we talk about the crash is coming, people. Brace yourselves. But before the crash, like 2007, that was a great year.
If you know you can run a business where you don't need to have a lot of money, and you can do these kind of deals where you just need reservation money because you're going to get investors from everywhere, you can literally go to loads of builders and start buying up stuff. The only thing stopping me from buying as much as I wanted was I didn't have as many investors as I wanted. But in 2008, we had a pipeline of about 900 apartments that were coming up for completion. So we were probably the biggest buyers of off-plan property in the country. I'll never know, but I would have thought there wouldn't have been anybody buying the scale that we were buying. Yeah. And it utterly transformed me.
Yeah.
It utterly transformed me. Was I happy? No, not at all. I mean, there was an adrenaline rush. There was money coming in because we lived in a nice house, you have a nice car, you can go on nice holidays. But I liken it to the idea of going up a mountain and you expect to see a view, don't you? When you go up a mountain, you expect to see some nice scenery, but there's nothing there. And that's really what my life was like. There was no deep satisfaction or joy. I became very arrogant, very ruthless, and I was a terrible husband. I won't go into too much detail about that, but I didn't treat my wife well for many years. And that was my life.
Isn't that interesting that for your parents, you would have identified, the problem in their marriage was lack of money.
Yes.
And now in your own marriage, lots of money.
Yes.
Still problems.
Still problems, yeah.
So tell us about the crash and what that did.
Well, 2008, you know what happened? The credit crunch happened. The mortgage market collapsed. The values dropped in prices. So suddenly, if you imagine I've gone to build and bought, I don't know, let's say a block for 30 million. And I've sold that block individually for maybe, let's say, 35 million. But imagine that now that block is worth 25 million, 5 million less than what I paid for it. And so what happens in that situation is that the builders will then sue me. Now, I could go on and try and sue my investors, but what is the point? Where are they going to get the money from to complete on these transactions? Because the mortgage market's collapsed. They can't get the mortgages. And so it was, one day we were living the high life, so to speak, and the next minute, your business is gone. And the banks stopped lending on these kind of transactions. So they were all lending on these transactions where I buy an apartment and sell on the contract, a signable contract. And so it was just creditor after creditor, basically, coming after me. Very, very quickly, I remember with one of the builders, going out for nice meals with the builder. When the crash happened, we met up at a service station on the M1. That was the easiest place to meet, and we had a cup of tea, and we're waiting to see who is actually going to buy the cup of tea. That's how it became, because the money just stopped coming into the company overnight.
Goodness me. And it wasn't just a financial crash for you in 2008. There was also some personal tragedy.
Yes, yeah.
What was that?
So my son was 2, had just turned 2, and had been hospitalized, I think, 6 times as a baby, and then he turned 2. And a few weeks after turning 2, got a phone call from my wife because I was in the office, and she said, I'm taking our son in the ambulance to Northwick Park Hospital in Harrow, and just get there as quickly as you can. So I just, I legged it out. And we knew the drill because my son had been hospitalized before with breathing difficulties, so he'd be given the nebulizer and often kept in hospital sometimes for 3 or 4 days because, he was a sickly child. But never before had he been rushed in an ambulance. Got to the hospital, the nebulizer failed to work. And I couldn't see any doctors, but there were nurses there, and they looked like they were panicking. And before I knew it, we were being rushed into resuscitation. So I'm holding my son. There's nurses coming in with us, telling us we've got to get into resuscitation. Get in there, and when I'm in there, my son's airway shut down. And, that's my flesh and blood. Your son, and you're holding your son, and your son is not breathing. And I don't know if you've been in any of those situations before, similar situations, but the room was packed literally in minutes. They were flying in. There were probably 10 to 15 people in that room. I think at one point there were 4 or 5 doctors in that room. And we were ushered into the room next door. He was intubated, and there was all kinds of complications. There's somebody doing medicine here, so you'll probably understand this far more than I do, because in those sort of situations you don't get to ask any questions. But there was issues with his carbon dioxide levels as well. And they were on a phone, the doctors, because we kept on going in and out, to another doctor. So there was issues there, and they didn't know how to resolve it amongst the doctors in the room. I mean, what do you do in one of those situations, in the room next door? Well, we fell to our knees in prayer. And I remember distinctly turning my back on God as a kid, because I heard about Christianity and about God and faith and the importance of it. And I remember saying, how relevant is this in my life? Money is more important.
And in that moment, you realize that actually we are flesh and we are dependent. And you did, in a sense, a very natural thing. It sounds supernatural, doesn't it, prayer? But actually, when you realize you're at the end of the rope,
absolutely.
Prayer is the most natural thing.
And we received the prayers of a Christian couple, because what happened was he was transferred to St. Thomas's in London, and he was in the Evelina ward there. And the consultant basically told us on the fourth day, because he's just there on a machine basically, and said he's not going to open his eyes for any time yet. It was one of those conversations that it felt like the doctor was preparing us for the worst, because he was in critical condition. They couldn't quite work out what was going on, and we were so receptive to the prayers of this Christian couple that prayed for him. I'd experienced sort of prayer, I suppose, as a Hindu, but I'd never experienced people praying for people that they didn't know very well. And this lady in particular that prayed wept bitterly for my son. And I was overwhelmed by the compassion. And so, yes, I suppose in that kind of situation, you just want to take it all, You're just receiving whatever support you can get.
And that relationship developed and became a relationship of great trust. And,
yes.
And then they kind of invited you to church and that sort of thing?
Well, what happened? So we were told by the doctors on the fourth day, your son's not going to open his eyes. And that just hit me and my wife. And she then did the ward round. And obviously these Christians are praying because they got the church to pray as well. And they're praying, I later found out they were praying for a miraculous healing. That's what they were praying for. They weren't praying, they were really praying big, big prayers that my son would suddenly just, wake up. And on that fourth day, the consultant did, the ward round, came back round to our bed, and my son just sat up in bed. Just sat up in bed like there was no issue whatsoever. Now, if you imagine this situation, and if there's medics, you'll probably understand, but he's got drugs being pumped into him. He's not been weaned off the drugs, and he just sits up in bed, and he just starts pulling away at the wires like there's no problem. And he's 2 years old. Well, this Christian couple, I had to go to church to say thank you. To the shock of my wife, I said, look, we're going to go to church and say thank you to this couple for their prayers. And she thought I was crazy because, I was so dead against the whole idea of church and Christianity, because look, if there's Christians in the house, I thought they were a bit of a strange bunch, from my university days.
Yeah.
And they didn't dress very well back then, but I'm sure they dress very well today. So I'm thinking, I don't want to go to church, but this couple prayed for my son. I'm going to go to church. And I said to my wife, 2 Sundays, not 1 Sunday.
Okay. Okay.
And so we went. And if I'm honest, I found it a bit boring and a bit restless. I'm an entrepreneur. I wanted to be doing business on a Sunday, not going into church. But they invited me to church a 3rd Sunday. And I couldn't say no because I thought that's going to be rude. They prayed for my son. So we went as a church, as a family to church, on that 3rd Sunday. And as I walked into the room, I felt something. I don't know how to describe it, but I walked in, not with the right mindset, but I was just hit. It was like I was just walking into a room like this. Is this an Anglican church, Church of England church? Yeah. So it was in a Church of England church. But as I walked in, it was like I could almost feel it in the air. And so I was tuned in, and I just listened to the message of the Christian message again, of Jesus Christ that died for sinners like me. And I'd lived such a sinful life. And I believed it, wholeheartedly believed that the cross was for real. And I went into church 3 or 4 Sundays later and made a commitment. And my wife didn't recognize me. So I walked in, became a Christian, and she didn't recognize. So my personality changed in quite an extreme way. My mum thought I joined a cult, and she probably still thinks that I have joined a cult. But that was the journey, yeah.
So let's go through how that has changed marriage and how it's changed your relationship to money. But let's start off with marriage. Like how has it changed your relationship with your wife?
Well, as I said, I didn't treat her well. And I felt that when I became a Christian, I felt that I couldn't build a successful marriage on dishonesty. So although I'd been treating her badly, I'd also not been treating her well, because I wasn't faithful in my marriage. And so I thought I had to be honest with her about that. And see, when I became a Christian, I started to sense things from God, because it was such a big conversion experience. If you imagine, I've walked in and then I've walked out as somebody new. And I started to hear things which I didn't realize was the Holy Spirit, because I hadn't read enough of the Bible to understand what was going on. But then I started to read, and then I understood, well, what you're hearing is from God, and you might get a deep sense of something or an utter conviction, and lots of different ways. I probably don't have time to go into it, but I knew that God had said you cannot build your marriage, an effective marriage, if you're dishonest. So go and speak to your wife. And I struggled with this for 24 hours, but I felt that I had to do this. And I suppose the only comfort I had was that if God is telling me to do this, everything will be right. And obviously, it did break her, because it would do when you find out that you're not the man. Although she had a sense anyway, but still hearing it wasn't easy. But I would say within literally days, it was extraordinary. Our marriage was like a jigsaw puzzle. All the pieces have come out, and God started to put all the pieces together again. And it was like the whole marriage just started to be healed and strengthened. And then I found myself one day in a church, because I wanted to, basically make a commitment. I hadn't committed, I hadn't kept to any vows before that. And so we got married again. Just me, my wife, and the vicar, and that was it. It was simple, but as far as I was concerned, I'm making a commitment to her in the eyes of God.
So your marriage starts to being put back together, and then tell us about business, because you've still got the creditors knocking on the door, don't you?
Yeah.
And how does that resolve itself?
Well, there was 15 creditors after us. The accountants had basically said, you're finished, so you've got to put your company into administration. And somebody from a big accountancy firm, I won't mention the firm, had an off-the-record chat with us to say, Manoj, take some money out of your business, because you are finished. You're losing everything, your home, everything, because you've given personal guarantees away. And so 15 creditors, 2 personal guarantees. And put it this way, if all the builders come after me, they're after something like £300 million. I didn't have £300 million in my account, So there was no way for me to actually carry on this business. But I prayed that every creditor would reach a compromise with us. And the accountants basically said, you can't physically do this. It's impossible. All 15 creditors compromised with us, which essentially means they stripped us. They took whatever they could money-wise. And the claims then also started to go into the courts to effectively bankrupt me. And I prayed to God that we would be spared that. And I remember getting a phone call from one of the solicitors one day and saying, look, Manoj, they've suddenly done a U-turn. They don't want to bankrupt you. Just come in. You need to sign this, I think it's Tomlin order or something like that. I don't know what the names are. If you're in law, you probably understand. And we were let off, and the other one let us off as well. So we were stripped of our business, so to speak, and lost a lot of our personal wealth as well. But we were never lost our home.
So tell me, what does money mean to you now? Because, you haven't become a monk. You haven't forsworn money. You still think it's meaningful, useful. You can use it for good things. What is your attitude to money now?
It hasn't got a hold over me anymore. The amount of money that I earn today compared to what I earned, back then. I could go and stay in really expensive hotels and buy lots of expensive things. I remember 2007 going out on a night, entertaining some of my clients. I think I spent about £15,000, that's just on a night out. So you can spend a lot of money. For about 7-8 years after the credit crunch, we didn't go abroad. So we couldn't afford to go abroad. So if you imagine you're going from nice holidays and then going to caravan holidays. So caravan holidays, St. Ives, like St. Ives. But I was happy. I was happy. We tend to go to St. Kitts and Nevis in the Caribbean. The last 2 years, stay in a 3-star hotel. But I'm just so happy wherever I am. It doesn't matter anymore because the money didn't really bring me the satisfaction that I thought it would have done.
Right. It doesn't have that hold over you anymore. And now you're involved in spreading the good news about who Jesus is, and so you've done this book, Filthy Rich, a terrific read about your own story and how Jesus has transformed you, and also something like this book, Simply Eat, Everyday Stories of Friendship, Food and Faith. This is another way that you're trying to share the good news of Jesus. What's this all about?
Well, I was sitting down maybe about a couple of years ago thinking about how I became a Christian. And it was through Christians that invited me into their home for food because they were the Christians that prayed for my son. And I thought to myself, I did meet a number of Christians along the journey. I even did business with Christians. But it was only this Christian couple that invited me into their home. And it was around the table that conversation went deeper. And they talked about this book called The Case for Christ. And then I accepted their prayers when my son was ill. And then we went round to their house multiple times and just used to eat and chat. And it was, it was their church that I went to. And I just discovered that, in the Bible, Jesus eats with so many people. Wouldn't it be great to put a book together of stories around the nation of Christians using food to build community, to build friendships with people, and in many cases to share their faith. And so it's called Simply Eat, and it normally retails at $15, but I brought some for £7.50 if anybody's interested.
Charmer, see? Told you. Charmer. Absolute charmer. 2 questions, just quickly, before we wrap up. So the message of Jesus you didn't really want to hear while ever you were climbing the greasy pole and trying to get on top and the money had a grip on you. But when you realize your weakness and your dependence, both through personal circumstances and financial circumstances, the message of Jesus really did grip you. What is it about the message of Jesus that you think changed your life?
Look, I think that if you break it down, we've all got aspirations, dreams, things that we want to do, but I think if you break it down, what most people want is they just want to be loved. When you break it down, that's ultimately what I wanted. I wanted to be loved, I wanted to be accepted, and I wanted to have a purpose in my life. And that's what Jesus has given to me because, I believe the story that God is the creator who died for the created. God took on human flesh. For about 6 months, I wept as I used to go to church. My wife used to say, you never used to cry about anything. I was so harsh, so ruthless. I go into church and I'm weeping because I couldn't get my head around, what Jesus Christ had done for me. So I'm loved. And through that relationship, I have a purpose now. So I have such a satisfied life. We don't have the kind of money we did, but we get to do some amazing things, which is to make a difference to the lives of people in lots of different ways. And one of the ways I'm doing that is just coming here today, because as far as I'm concerned, you matter to me and you matter to God. So I want to make sure that everybody at least hears the message, and then people can decide for themselves.
Brilliant. And so final question, if someone's here and they want to investigate this same Jesus that you've met, what's your tip for how to take things forward?
Well, I do share my faith openly and honestly, and I'm not ashamed of that. And I get lots of responses from people. And often I find people that have just, they've closed off the idea totally. And so all I would say is explore it. Explore it, and if it's for you, you'll discover something. You see, from where I'm sitting, God is for real. And if God is real, then you will experience God. So you will see something, you will experience something that will make you think, oh my goodness. So for example, let's say I can't see right now, and if God was to suddenly open your eyes and you can see, then you would know that something supernatural has happened. Well, God is for real, and so something supernatural will happen. And so that's the easiest way. But I think it's when you open your hearts, you probably encounter something like it essentially happened to us.
Open yourself to that. Shoot up a prayer. Say, God,
but just see what happens. Explore it, and then if you don't experience something, don't follow it.
It's great advice. Yeah. Great advice. And you'll be around a little bit afterwards,
yes, yeah.
and do check out the books. But ladies and gentlemen, Manoj Raithatha.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And here's a bit of advice if you want to take things further in terms of who is Jesus. We've actually given to you for free these copies of Mark's Gospel. Do you want to pick up your free copy of Mark's Gospel here? If you've already got one of these at home, then try not to get too many crumbs on this copy, and you can leave it for people afterwards. But if you don't have a copy of this already, this is our gift to you. We'd love you to have a look at it. And I just want to introduce you to a couple of stories here that I was reminded of as I was thinking of Manoj's story. And the first story that it really reminded me of is on page 2 here. So the first 90 pages of this is Mark's Gospel. So a gospel is just a biography of Jesus. And the New Testament kicks off with Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, these 4 biographies of Jesus. And you can read about it in the first 90 pages of this book. And you'll see on page 2, 3/4 of the way down the page, you'll see this event called the baptism and testing of Jesus. And here, in brief, you will encounter the meaning of life, right? A lot of people study for years and go on great pilgrimages and spend a lot of money trying to figure out what the meaning of life is, and it's on page 2 of this book. Isn't that fun? Let's have a look at the meaning of life. I think this is the meaning of life. Check it out. From that little number 9, that means it's verse 9 in chapter 1. At that time, Jesus came from Nazareth in Galilee and was baptized by John in the Jordan. Baptism just means it's a wash, a ritual wash. The idea is that we get dirty on the outside, so we have a wash on the outside. And the Bible says, oh yeah, we also get dirty on the inside. And maybe we need to have a wash on the inside. That's what these people think. And so they all come to John at the Jordan River. Verse 10, just as Jesus was coming up out of the water, he saw heaven being torn open. And what would you expect to see? If heaven could be torn open, if you could see through the curtain into ultimate reality, what would you see if you could see through into ultimate reality? Would you just see like cogs and levers just whirring mechanically? Would you just see chaos swirling? Would you see a distant God, arms folded, tutting? What would you see if you saw into ultimate reality, if heaven was opened up? Well, according to the Bible, Jesus gives you a window onto ultimate reality. Jesus shows you what heaven is like. Jesus shows you what God is like. What is God like? Well, he saw heaven being torn open and the Spirit descending on Jesus like a dove, and a voice came from heaven, "You are my Son whom I love, with you I am well pleased." And right there is the meaning of life. Right there, the curtain is being torn open and you're getting to see into ultimate reality. And what do you see? You see Jesus being filled by the Holy Spirit, being loved by a heavenly Father. And according to the Bible, that family of love is where you and I belong. We belong as members of this divine family. A Father always loving his Son Jesus in the joy of the Holy Spirit. We belong in these waters. The meaning of life is to stand in those waters, confessing that you need a bath, confessing that you need a bit of a wash on the inside, and putting your hand into Jesus' hands and hearing that verdict come down from heaven. What a verdict. You're my child. I love you. I'm pleased with you. I'm proud of you. You are made to hear that verdict. And everything you ever do in life, you're chasing that verdict. Maybe you're chasing it like Manoj was chasing that verdict, right? How was he chasing it? Well, he was chasing it through money, through success, through the adrenaline rush, to get the power, to accumulate the wealth, to be on the Times rich list, the Sunday Times rich list. Wouldn't that be amazing? To be thought of as that kind of person. You know, Manoj will tell you, really what he was seeking was something that you get for free here. That the eyes of the one person who really matters sees you down to the core of your being and says, I love you, you're great, I'm well pleased with you. And some of us, we walk away from that verdict and we try to get that feeling from money. And some of us walk away from that verdict and we try to get that feeling through fame. And some of us walk away from that verdict and we try to get it through a series of relationships or sex or power or whatever it is. I don't know how it is you're chasing that verdict, but Jesus comes to say it's for free. All you've got to do is step into the waters and say, actually, I've been getting it wrong. Sorry about that. I do need a bath. I do need a wash on the inside. Now, Spirit, fill me. Now, Jesus, possess me. Now, Father, love me. That's the meaning of life. Simple, isn't it? It's good news, though. And it would save you so much bother if you didn't have to do what Manoj had to go through, climb every mountain. And what did he find? When he got to the top of his particular mountain, there was nothing there. Because all the way down here in the valley, there's the verdict of the Father. Already down here in the valley, there's Jesus, who's come to stoop to our level, to be with us, to be for us, to love us, to bring us into his everlasting love. But no, we climb this mountain and there's nothing there. We climb that mountain, there's nothing there. We climb that mountain, there's nothing there. What are we like? A little foolish, wouldn't you say? So I want to introduce you on page 50, and I'll just finish with this, to two examples of how people try to find meaning in life. And it's a fascinating juxtaposition. Mark has told us the meaning of life right at the outset of his gospel. And then he wants to show us two different responses. If God is a family of love, how should we respond to that? Well, the first response, you can see on page 50, again, 3/4 of the way down, it says, the little children and Jesus. Here is a good response to the God who is a family of love. The little children and Jesus, verse 13. People were bringing little children to Jesus. It's a word that means like toddlers and below, right? Little children. Little children to Jesus, for him to place his hands on them. But the disciples rebuked them. When Jesus saw this, he was indignant. He said to them, "Let the little children come to me, and do not hinder them, for the kingdom of God belongs to such as these. Truly I tell you, anyone who will not receive the kingdom of God like a little child will never enter it." And he took the children in his arms, placed his hands on them, and blessed them. Beautiful scene. Because if God is a family of love, then how should we approach God? Like little children. And Jesus has got the perfect illustrations of this truth. He's got these little toddlers around him, and you can imagine the kids just kind of crawling all over him and bouncing them. He's bouncing them on his knee, and he's singing songs to them, playing games. And all the other disciples, they're much too important for this. And they think Jesus is far too important for these children. And Jesus is like, no. This is a picture of heaven. They've got nothing, and I give them everything. Right? Because if God is a family of love, how should you come to God? Should you come to God full of your own achievements and performances and work? Is that how you should come to God? No, you should come to God like a little child, right? If you're walking along and you see a lovely family home and you think to yourself, I'd like to belong to that family. Just try it. Just try ringing the doorbell and seeing what happens. You say, I see you're having Sunday lunch. Is that chicken? Yes. I was just wondering if I could join your family. Join our family? Yeah, I was just thinking maybe you'd let me join your family. How's no? Is no okay? Yeah, but look, have you checked out my CV? I did go to Southampton University. And I can juggle. I'm great at parties. Will you let me join your family? And what will they tell you? They will say, please get off the doorstep, you crazy, crazy person, right? We will call the police. Isn't that what they say? And then maybe you say, no, I'll wash all your windows. I'll hoover all your floors. I'll do the dishes. At that point, they might let you in as a servant. but they could never let you in as a member of the family, right? The only way you can get into a family is if the family already loves you. It's the only way into a family. Whether you are born naturally into a family, whether you're adopted into a family, either way, the only way into a family is when the family already love you, right? You contribute nothing to the whole scenario, but the family already love you, and they just, fine, come on in, right? That's the way family works. And so little children coming to Jesus, that's how heaven works. Heaven's gates are as wide as the arms of Jesus if you come like a little child. But heaven's gates are as narrow as the eye of a needle if you come as a rich young ruler. And that's what this next passage is all about. So you'll see the heading on page 52, the rich and the kingdom of God. Here comes a rich, powerful young man. He's got everything that we prize today. You know, he's famous, he's wealthy, he's powerful, he's got youth on his side. And Jesus will say to him, heaven's gates are as narrow as the eye of a needle for you. Interesting. Verse 17, as Jesus started on his way, a man ran up to him and fell on his knees before him. Good teacher, he asked, what must I do to inherit eternal life? Now, do you notice how he's mixing two different ideas here in that sentence? Do and inherit. You see, those two words belong to two different worlds, don't they? You know, what must I do to inherit Grandpa's stamp collection? Like, nothing. Like, he's Grandpa. I'm his grandson. I'm in the will because I'm family, right? I inherit because I'm family. Inheritance is family language, right? And so this rich young ruler, he's got something right, you know, that actually heaven is a family of love that invites you in. It's an inheritance. If you're in the family, you're in, right? But then he's mixed it up with this other idea. What must I do to inherit eternal life? It's like the guy who stands on the doorstep saying, how much can I pay you to become a member of your family? That's not how family works. It's not how heaven works either. You'll never get in with God by what you do. Because by the nature of the case, you don't audition for a family. You don't sit an exam to get into a family. You don't pay your way into a family. If you get into a family, it's because of the prior love of the family, and they just adopt you in, right? You don't do anything. So this guy has got some false ideas, and so what's Jesus going to do? Well, verse 18, he does what he always does. He fires a question back. It's like, why do you call me good? Jesus answered. No one is good except God alone. So he's trying to figure out where this guy is coming from. You know that only God is good, and you just called me good. Do you get who I am? Do you get it? Do you really get it? Because Jesus is God the Son, full of the Holy Spirit, the Son of the Father. There he is. And this kid has said, I think you're good. And Jesus is saying, do you really understand what you're saying? Do you really get who I am? No, he doesn't get who Jesus is. So Jesus goes on and he tries to diagnose where the kid is at. And he says, you know the commandments. You shall not murder, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not steal, you shall not give false testimony, you shall not defraud, honor your father and mother. This is the good life of God that was given way back in the Old Testament, the 10 Commandments. The good life of God that is to be lived out. And Jesus is like, you want to talk about goodness? Does goodness just flow out of you, just naturally? Is that what you're like? Are you a fountain of life? Is that what you're like? That's what God's like. But what about you? Are you a fountain of life, just always doing the good? And this poor kid, what does he say? Verse 20, teacher, he declared, all these I have kept since I was a boy. Now, if I was in the Jesus situation in this conversation, I would have kind of flown off the handle. I would have, you ridiculous person. You've broken half the commandments before breakfast. What are you talking about? But Jesus is much more gracious than I am. Verse 21, Jesus looked at him and loved him. Don't you just love Jesus? You know, here's this kid, he's getting everything wrong. He's trying to climb up in the world into heaven. He's trying to earn his way into a family. And he's lying about himself. He's lying about his goodness. I've always been good. He thinks back to his youth and he says, I've only ever done righteous things. I mean, the virtue signaling here is appalling, but don't you just love Jesus? He says, oh, I love you. You're a fool, but I love you. And then he says, one thing you lack. And I love this. If I was to film this scene, I'd get Clint Eastwood to play Jesus in this scene. How cool is this? One thing you lack, and then Clint Eastwood would just have a long drag on a cigar. One thing you lack. Everything, right? Isn't that? That's basically what it does here. One thing you lack, he says, go sell everything you have and give to the poor, and you'll have treasure in heaven. Then come follow me, right? He's like, if you want to climb your way into heaven, if you want to earn your way into the family, there's just a tiny little thing you need to tweak, right? You need to be an entirely different kind of human being. That's it. Just flick that little switch within you, turn everything 180 degrees around. You had absolutely built your life on money. Now entirely renounce that and be an entirely new human being. Just do that. Just do that. Well, he's not going to be able to do that, right? But what's Jesus doing in that moment? He's trying to show him the folly of climbing the ladder up into heaven. You don't climb the ladder up into heaven. You can't do that. You can't earn your way into a family, and you cannot earn your way into Jesus' good books. It's just impossible. And so this kid, I guess the best thing that can happen to this kid is as he's climbed up this mountain, Jesus has kind of brought him back down into the valley, hasn't he? And told him, look, you've got nothing, right? Do you recognize you've got nothing? Or do you still think your hill means something? You know, the world is just full of people who have climbed to the top of a hill. They've seen that there's nothing there, but they don't want to climb down again. Because they've invested so much in this hill, whether it's sex, money, power, fame, whatever it is, they've got to the top, and it's got to mean something, right? Because they've invested their whole life in this thing, and the whole time Jesus is trying to say, look, I love you, but you are not on top of a hill, you're down in a valley, and you need a bath. But if you would just recognize that you're down in that valley, and if you just take that bath, my goodness, there's a flow of forgiving, merciful, gracious love that is cascading down from heaven. There is a Father who is ready to just embrace you and call you his child. But are you going to claim that the hill you're on is everything? Or are you going to climb down? What's going to happen for this kid? Well, verse 22, at this the man's face fell. He went away sad because he had great wealth. Jesus looked around and said to his disciples, how hard it is for the rich to enter the kingdom of God. That's absolute dynamite. It was especially dynamite back in the first century because they kind of looked around and they thought, well, if you're doing well in earthly terms, surely that means you have the smile of heaven. Surely, if you're doing well on earth, it must mean you're doing well in heaven. And Jesus is like, why would you think that? What's earth got to do with heaven in that sense? Just because you're rich on earth doesn't mean you're rich in the eyes of God. No, how hard it is for the rich to enter the kingdom of God. The disciples were amazed at his words, but Jesus doubles down and he says, children, how hard it is to enter the kingdom of God. It is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for someone who is rich to enter the kingdom of God. That's a funny image, don't you think? If you were here last night, you learnt about comedy and Christianity, and James Carey and I were talking about how often Jesus uses comic imagery. This is comic imagery, don't you think? It's easier for a camel to get through the eye of a needle than for a rich person to get into heaven. You think that's pretty hard, right? A camel through the eye of a needle, that's very difficult, even with a food processor. Still tricky. Even if you grease the camel and push really hard, probably not going to happen, right? Again, it's as ridiculous as auditioning for a family. It's as ridiculous as thinking you can earn heaven. You can't. You can't. And Jesus uses ridiculous imagery to talk about how ridiculous it is. And look, it's not just money. Money is just one hill that we can climb and think we've gotten closer to God. I don't know what your hill is. What are you grasping at in life to make you feel like you're okay? To make you feel like you've lived your life well? Well, as high as you get, Mount Everest is higher than Mount Snowdon, but they're both pretty equally distant from the sun, wouldn't you say? Right? Maybe you've climbed one hill really well. Maybe your hill is higher than somebody else's hill. But you're both equally far from the stars, wouldn't you say? And why do you think anything that you're doing to earn on planet Earth makes any difference with how God is going to receive you? God is a family of love. He wants little children. So if money is your big thing, like it was with Manoj, if money is your big thing, then it's very obvious what you should do. Like, can you allow money not to be your source of identity? Can you instead come before God and just say, look, I might have tens of millions of pounds to my name, but that means nothing to you. I come to you, God, like a little child. Will you receive me like that? And then all of a sudden, money suddenly doesn't have its grip on you. Now you can start to use money for good. Now you can start to use influence for good. You can start to use power and competency for good. But maybe it's something else in life. Maybe you've been climbing a different hill. Are you able to say to the God of heaven, look, God, I know that none of that matters. I come before you like a little child. Will you wash me? And will you fill me with your Spirit? Will you receive me into your family of love like a little child? That's what becoming a Christian is all about. Jesus kind of finishes this off by saying, the disciples were even more amazed, verse 26, and said to each other, who then can be saved? Jesus looked at them and said, with man this is impossible, but not with God. All things are possible with God. It's not about you ascending towards heaven. It's about the great God who came down, the creator who became the created, right, in Jesus, to die for the creature. It's about him coming down and loving you at your worst. It's not about you ascending to become the best version of you. It's about God coming down, loving you even in the pit, embracing you, bringing you in to that cascading love from the Father, through the Son, by the Spirit. Do you want in on that? Or do you want to keep climbing the hills? If you want in on this, it's actually really easy. It's actually really easy. It's just about coming to Jesus and just saying, Jesus, yeah, I need a bath on the inside. I need that forgiveness. But Jesus, I want to receive you. I want to belong to you. Bring me in on your love. Fill me with your Spirit and walk me through this life and into your heaven of love. Is that something you want? Why don't we all bow our heads and let me just offer a prayer for people in the room who might want that and who might want to say, Jesus, I want in on this. Should we just bow our heads and let me lead you in a prayer that you can say. The words are not magic, but it might be one way of responding to this Jesus who is calling you home. Dear Jesus, I'm sorry for climbing up these hills in my own strength. I see now that you have come down to love me. Jesus, I come to you like a little child. Get your hands on me. I want to belong to you. Please fill me with your Spirit. Please introduce me to your Father. Cleanse me from my sin and selfishness. And walk with me through this world and into your future of love. Amen. Amen. If you've prayed a prayer like that, maybe for the first time, or perhaps you've come back to faith in a significant way this week, we'd love to hear from you. You'll hear in a second ways that you can get in touch with us, but don't leave without letting somebody know. Maybe the person who brought you, maybe you could talk to Manoj, maybe you could talk to me, but do get in touch with us, because walking with Jesus is a team sport, and we need each other's help. Thanks so much for listening. I'll hand back to the guys.
Thank you, Glenn, and thank you, Manoj. If you've enjoyed this evening, or it's made you think, we've got plenty more coming up this week. Tomorrow lunchtime at 12 and 1, we're in Bar 2 of the Student Union, answering the question, is there any meaning in our pain? Then in the evening at Portswood Church at 6 o'clock, there is a meal on the topic of love that's specifically geared towards international students, but everyone is welcome to come along.
Yeah. And at 7:45, once again, here at the same time as it started tonight, we've got the Creative Contributions Evening. This is an evening with another talk from Glenn, looking at the theme of imagination. And it's also got some live performances, lots of talent, and some interactive activities as well. If you can relate to Manoj's story, or you think to yourself, well, how do I approach God as a child of this family? How do I take this further? Perhaps you prayed that prayer tonight. Well, we've got something called Being Human. I believe there's a video about it, if you'd like to watch that with me now. Yes, maybe the video is coming later. Next thing to talk about is Uncover. The uncovers on your table are to take away. Please do make use of these resources. They're yours. Perhaps if you want to read more of it, ask someone in a human jumper to go through it with you. It's great to learn about Jesus, especially if you were inspired by what you heard tonight. As well as that, we have a bookstall. The bookstall should be at the back, just there. Manoj and Glenn both have written books on the bookstall, so do go and check that out.
While we're waiting for the video, you've got on your tables, there's white feedback forms. While waiting now, if you could fill them in, tell us what you've enjoyed.
Hey there. We just wanted to say thank you for coming to today's event.
Brilliant.
And we really hope that you've enjoyed it. If you still have questions and you want to explore Christianity further after this week of events, then the Christian Union will be running a 4-week series of nights entitled Being Human. Each night will... Hey there, we just wanted to say thank you for coming to today's event, and we really hope that you've enjoyed it. If you still have questions and you want to explore Christianity further after this week of events, then the Christian Union will be running a 4-week series of nights entitled Being Human. Each night will be on a Thursday, commencing from the 21st of February, running for 4 weeks, in Building 34, Room 5007. If you find it hard to find a building, there will be people in blue jumpers outside the library from 7:15 to help you find your way. Each night will include free pizza, a short talk, and space for discussion afterwards. You can ask anything that's on your mind. If you've wanted to try reading the Bible, then we'd love to tell you about Uncover. Uncover is an eyewitness account of Jesus' life written by the Apostle Mark. It's jam-packed with resources, links, and Bible studies for you to do with a friend. If you'd like to take one away with you, there's plenty here for you. If you'd like to read through Uncover with a friend, then we'd love to tell you about Coffee and a Chat. If you'd like to meet up with a Christian,